this down. Okay. Okay, here we go. Hi everybody, my name is Johannes Vloothuis. I'm a professional artist. I've been teaching art for 25 years, 10 years for Artist Network, which is a large publishing company that publishes most of the art magazines that you'll find in bookstores. And I'm in charge of the online classes that I give every Saturday, and we have a demo today for free so you can get acquainted with me and how our classes work, and there's students that are texting right now. So if you have any questions, I would prefer that you would type those in capital letters so we can scan over their text and we can be able to answer your questions. Okay, so I can spot them very quickly. So let's get started. Today we're going to do something very interesting, which will be to paint trees with a sponge, sea sponge. So you can get these sea sponges at, here, just let me move this video from here now. Just 1 second. Okay, so you can get these at Michael's. That's where I found them, but I think they have them in different art stores as well. I'll get my palette over here for you guys to see. Just move this over here so you can see me mix colors in real time. There we go. You can see that there's the pigment letters are there for you to pick which ones I'm using while I'm painting. Okay, what's going on? Yeah. Okay. So anyway, these are sponges. I got a whole bunch of them, different sizes, different flavors, and so there's some of them that are more fine. Some of them that are more coarse. You've got to experiment which ones work the best. Some of these I cut down with scissors, and I end up with this kind of result over here. That tree was done with sponges yesterday during a practice run. Am I not on right now? Let's see. I should be on. Oh, okay. Okay. So it's a delayed message. All right. So, okay. So we're going to see how we can paint trees in a very easy way. I got a little sketch here that we're going to work with. So let's get started. So first thing I'm going to do is take my color mixture from here. Get my brush and water, and we're going to bring out, I like to mix my greens with Prussian blue. Actually, the sky, let's start with the sky first, cerulean. So let's pop this in here. I'm going to add water to it first so we get different variations so it doesn't look like it's all flat tone. So just randomly wet here and there. And where the paint hits the water, that's going to appear like clouds. So you can see me grab this as cerulean blue. The reason I use cerulean blue, it's got a little bit of green in it. And so it's always better to not to use a stark blue like ultramarine blue for the sky, for example, would probably not be a good idea because you can't harmonize it with the rest of the painting. So I'm just purposely skipping here and there. I'm using Graham watercolor paints. There's advantages and disadvantages to those pigments. They're easier for glazing, but they're very difficult to lift off when you want to make a correction. So I'm just going to go over the tree. It's going to be dark in there anyway. So I'm going to leave that little glow there. Now, when you do skies, take into account the sky can never be too light, but it can be too dark. So you always want to make sure that you have, even if you end up with a dark painting with, let's say you get really dark on your trees, which is difficult with watercolor, but it can happen. It's more like an oils or pastel thing. But when you get very dark, as long as your sky is luminous, with, in other words, a lot of light in it, your painting will still look like it's a day scene. And that always saves the painting when you do that. Okay. So just going right over the trees. And I'm just going to leave those little dots in the sky. You can read those as seagulls or whatever you want to make them out to be. Some watercolor artists like to leave little white dots in their paintings. It's a love-hate situation. Some people love them, some people don't. Okay, I'm going to just slightly dry that a bit. So I'm going to make a little bit of noise. Barbara, everything on YouTube stays recorded. It's perpetually recorded. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a background here. That's because I'm rushing. I'm going to do several swatches for you today. We have lots to cover today, and I'm going to try to fit that in a reasonably short period of time. Okay, so now there have been demonstrations with sea sponges before. But my technique is going to be a little bit of an upgrade of that, because the thing is, with when you do a tree like this in watercolor, everything seems to be pasted on because everything's too hard edged. So the technique that I apply is I do lost and found edges. So here, let me dry that perfectly well first, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, there we go. So now I'm going to do this. This is the difference. And I always do this with foliage. We're going to do a spot wetting, lost and found. And you're going to see in a few minutes why that is important. So I'm going to do tap in here, tap here. And I've almost got my ear on the table because I'm looking at it sideways to get the shimmer of my studio light to see what parts are wet and what parts are not. We're going to do this wet on wet effect here too. Well, we can do that later. Okay, so now comes the sponge technique. So what you do is you squeeze it. You can get different sizes randomly. So this is the trick here. As you're loading your sea sponge with color, and as you're applying it, vary the pressure. Sometimes you go like really a lot of pressure and you get smaller foliage clusters, and then you let go and you get bigger, larger clusters. Okay, so I'm going to use raw sienna because I like to mix my own greens. I'm not very much in favor of buying pre-mixed greens. I have them on my palette, but I don't really like them because you don't get enough variation with it. So I prefer to do it this way. Raw sienna or yellow ochre, pale, and Prussian blue are excellent for making greens. Okay, that's just the starting point. Then we can get A little bit of cadmium orange over here to just switch the flavor a little bit. Let's make this a little bit darker. You can make your trees pretty dark. So I'm not, as you can see on my palette, I'm not thoroughly mixing, I'm just partially mixing. I just mingle the colors. So now I'm going to grab this and just scoop it up. Throw in a little bit of this. Just hope for the best. And then start tapping. I'm going to mix a little bit more. Darker. You can already see the foliage clusters forming. I want to get really dark on this. There we go. I can also tap like this to load. Isn't that cool? You can already start to see it form. Now I want a little bit more of a, some of these edges have to be lost. So I'm going to wet that again. It's not really doing it. Otherwise it looks too much like it's pasted on, like I said earlier. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And leave some of those sky gaps. Those are good so that you can put your tree branches through that. And we can go maybe make them very ethereal. Yeah, that's good like that. And also think of your negative space. So I have little bushes coming up here as well. And it's also good to have your tree go right out of the painting. Crop it right out. Now, let's change the flavor a little bit. We don't want a repetition. The same thing over and over again. So I'm going to put a little bit more of this green in here. Make this one brighter. And maybe if you can just switch your sponge for another one. But I guess this one's working, so I can use this. You can use this technique with oils. If you use mineral spirits, you have to dilute it with mineral spirits. And of course, with acrylics, that wouldn't be a problem. It would be the same principle, right? There, I'm getting some bleeding here. That's what I want. Lots of open spaces there. This is starting to look really good in here. I call that the principle of contrast. You have like a heavy area and then some more subtle areas or more ethereal areas. And when the viewers make that contrast, it looks really good. So I'm leaving more open space in here so these two don't compete. Ooh, that didn't work out. I squeezed it too hard. Well, we'll just improvise a solution to that, right? There, we just made it more. Now, there's certain secrets that I want to give you with trees. Pastels won't work. I haven't been able to do it with pastels. Okay, first of all, never, I will say never, in my book anyway, don't create a tree whose foliage ends up looking round. That would be one really good piece of advice I can give you. In other words, they make them oval, and they can never be too oval. You can get as oval as you want with those trees. Okay, so we got the right amount of bleeding here. And I added a little bit of more of a lemon green there to give it more vibrancy. And you'll see, another thing is don't assess your trees until you actually put the branches in, because it all comes alive when you do that. But you can start to see some wonderful effects in here. So let's do this one over here. We'll make that a little bit more vibrant as well. A little bit of a water. In other words, don't put it all on wet paper. Sorry, don't do it all on dry paper, because you're going to get too much of a monotonous contour to it. Like this over here. That's too monotonous, right? So if you compare that where some of it's bleeding. And the idea is that where the tree bleeds, you actually get the idea that it's further back. Like it's projecting backwards, that part of the foliage. Okay, I'm going to switch my sponge for another one now. That one's pretty impregnated with color. Always wet your sponge before you load it. This work both, yes, but here's the thing, Barbara. When you're, exactly what I said, David. I'm wetting the sponge first. And also, the secret is to do lost and found, some areas that are wet, some areas that are dry. That's exactly what I explained earlier. Okay, we're going to make this more into a blue-green now. You got to make sure you mix that properly, though. It's probably better to do a little bit of a test run on a sheet of paper first. Make sure that you don't undermix it, and then apply. Okay, again, you don't want to do everything on dry paper. Now, here's some of the secrets when it comes to trees. You want to create what is called an abstract shape, which means that both sides, and I've seen several people do demos, and they end up creating, almost perfect ovals or circles. And they got the technique right, but then the shape of the tree, in my book anyway, doesn't look right. So the way to fix that is just pay attention to the two contours and make sure that you have two different sides to your tree. As a matter of fact, I think I can add a little bit more on this edge here, because these are sort of like similar. So if I bring this over here like that and add more foliage, now I'm going to have an abstract design where two sides are different. There, that made a big difference, didn't it? I haven't tried it with pan pastels, no. But I think it would take up a lot of pigment and become very expensive to be dipping this in there like that. Oh my, this froze here. Hold on. My video froze. It never happens. Yeah, my video just froze. I'm gonna have to reboot this. That never happens. I don't know why it happened today. Does that work, Scott? Can we just resume from there? You want to text me? Can you all hear me? Yeah, just a minute. No, because you're not seeing my hand move, Scott. My hand's not moving. So I have to... see, it works on this one, but it doesn't work on the other one. That's... Okay, I'm going to just close this down and run it again. Okay, we're back. See, my hand's moving now, so we're good. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. Yeah, it's moving now. Okay. So we were talking about abstract shapes, right? So take an imaginary line down the middle, compare one side with another, and make sure the two sides are completely different. Like you see a lot of difference in the two, in making sure there's nothing that can fit like in a chocolate box. Okay, so I don't like to assess my trees until I actually put the tree trunks in. And that's when you get an idea of how you're doing. So I'm going to take advantage of the dark spots to do that. And while it's still wet, I can still do that and let it bleed in a little bit. And you're going to see how quickly this tree will start to come to life when you do that. Now, another principle that I use for doing this is that when you put tree trunks in, you can get pretty busy at the bottom, but don't get too busy at the very top because it brings the viewer's eye too far away from the center of interest. So don't put details at the top of the painting. The light will be coming from the left. See how that just suddenly gets life? We can put a real bold one in here too. Like a real big one. Now when you have the tree trunk hit the foliage, just rub that a little bit with your finger so it dissolves. If that were oil pastels, you'd do the same thing. I'll always take advantage of these gaps. Now, in nature, you're going to see a lot of sky holes. I don't like to put them in because it makes it look like the painting is pixelated. So my recommendation is instead of putting so many little sky holes, put large gaps, like in here, big gaps. And you put much fewer tree branches and twigs and trunks than you'd ever see in real life. You just need enough to show you that it's a tree, and that's enough. Like you put maybe not even 10% of them in there. Do I like this technique more? I think probably a combination. It all depends, because when you paint with a brush, it's more predictable. But let's say if you haven't been very successful at depicting trees with brushes, this could be a good alternative, right? Now I'm going to do something that's called negative painting, which means I'm going to start to carve out the darks. And I can do that with a sponge, but I prefer to do that with the brush. So I'm just going to take some violet. So now I'm paying attention to the contour here, and I got just the kind of bleeding that I wanted. This is what makes it look good, right? Because where that part is soft edged, that's telling you that the foliage is going towards the back. And the part that's, sharp, hard edged, tells you it's coming forward. So that's always a good plus. So I'm going to come in here, and now negative paint. I should be using this brush, actually. A round brush is better. Or I'll just use this one here. Now, I haven't used this technique very much, Barbara. It's a matter of maybe perfecting it more. And then I can tell you if I prefer it over the other one. But let's just say that for students that don't have like decades of experience, this could be a very good alternate reality that you can play with and see if you can make it work for yourself. Now, here's another trick. One of the mistakes that a lot of watercolor artists make is once they have that in there, they start putting more paint on top all over, and it looks like scabs. So if you're going to add any paint to a tree, it should be with the purpose of negative painting to bring out the 3D effect, which I'm doing right now, and I'm doing it at the side, so it's purposeful. And the important thing is to leave large clusters of foliage that are like solid, so that it doesn't look too busy. Because if I keep adding that everywhere, it's going to be a problem. And unfortunately, you do see that in nature, but you can't repeat those in trees. Okay, so maybe that's just enough there to, I think I could put a little bit in here as well, just because it's a little bit too flat. There. So this is a stage where you're like carving out the trees. And we can do it here as well. On the beach. Can use the sponges on the beach. I'm trying to understand what you're trying to mean with that. You mean natural sponges from the species of that are in oceans? I don't know. There's a technical name to that. I don't know the name. But see, I'm carving out the darks now. And the important thing is never go more than 1/3 darks and 2/3 lights, or 2/3 dark and 1/3 light, but never 50-50. So pay a lot of attention to that. And that's not only with this sea sponge technique for trees, that would be for all foliage. So there you can see we have an effective look there. Okay, let's do the bottom. I don't have to do the entire painting because I have different things to show you, different colors. So instead of doing a full painting, it probably would be more productive to show you different techniques. But I did the drawing there anyway so that you could see how you could put it into context. Okay, so we have, over here we're going to have some sage brushes. I mean, obviously, normally I would put maybe something that's wet and wet back there. But I think that, I'm very happy with this tree over here. So let's just clean up the palette. Sorry about the hiccup earlier, folks, about my system crashing. This is a live class, so things like that happen. But then if you have recordings, then you can ask questions, right? And get real answers in real time, so you win some and you lose some. Yes, we have someone that's, I use some of the typical artistic lingo, like negative painting, abstract shapes, and we have Pearl Stark is putting the definitions in text for you. I think these are, Barbara, these sea sponges are actually natural. They're not artificial. These are actually natural, organic sea sponges. The ones that are made out of plastic like this, they don't work well. They're too mechanical. They're not spontaneous enough, so I don't use those. For example, this one here, this one won't be very effective because it doesn't have that. You see, you want this. It has to be this actual sea sponge. Okay, so let's just do let this all in. Yeah, I think you're right. You'd save yourself the expense. I think if you can just pull them out from the rocks, that's where you find them. They're stuck on rocks, and away you go. You can do that. Okay, normally in my online classes that I do on Saturdays, I would do one painting and that's it. That would take several hours. I'd put something back there, put something back here. But like I said, I think we want to see different examples. So we're just going to assume that that's a cabin there and we got some background there. I'm just going to do some of these flowers so you can apply the same technique. Here, so you can get an idea of what I'm painting and visualizing. Here, I'll put this image up for you. That's more or less what I'm interpreting from the photograph into the painting. Of course, when you use that sponge technique, you don't have accuracy. You can't draw it in. You're really depending a lot on the happy accidents. Well, there you go. People already saying that they get it. They get it on fishing boats, and they clean them they disinfect them with chlorine. So when you have these many people watching, you're bound to get all kinds of really neat answers. Okay, let's get rid of that photograph now. I'll just leave that there for you. Small, but you can see it nevertheless. Okay, let's put the grass in now. That we can just do with a brush. So I'm going to use raw sienna, little touch of violet for that. A lot of watercolor is impressionism. I think one of the mistakes, unless you're really into, I mean, I've seen some very hyper-realist watercolor, but not in landscapes. You don't want to paint landscapes with the intent of hyper-realism because it loses its poetry, right? So watercolor is going to force you, in a way, to be impressionist. I know those yellows are very shocking, but we're going to take care of that. So let's do it like a vignette. Just go like this. Which, by the way, next Saturday, I'm promoting that now. there will be a painting that is done as a vignette, a bear. I'll show you the picture a little bit later. It's a bear looking for salmon on a waterfall. Put a kicker in here. Let's put some red. And I can go right over that. Leave some whites of the paper showing through. That's a plus for watercolor. And you can justify that and say, well, the sun, when it's positioned in such a way, it would hit the leaves, and you would have a lot of the sunlight bouncing off the leaves. Let's just splatter some stuff in here. Make it very watercolory. Okay, let's try that. Here goes the hurricane noise again. Okay, one of the questions Barbara's asking, what's the difference between a vignette and a regular painting? In a vignette, you're going to leave some areas of white paper, or you can do it with oils too. It's very undermined in oils. I don't know why more people don't do it. By the way, this is the painting that I'm going to do next Saturday. That's exactly what you'll be seeing me perform, is this little waterfall with the bear. But it's a vignette because the bottom left and right corners are just blank paper. So you leave parts that are completely incoherent. You don't fill it all in, and it's very advantageous when it comes to watercolor to do that. So, okay, let's get back to this. Now, I'm going to pop in some sage brushes, and I'm going to use the sponge technique for that as well. I'm just going to use a smaller one. It's already developing the painting, and you can see that I negative painted on purpose, leaving the white of the paper. So when I went over that with the Indian red, you can see like there's some foliage sticking up. You can see that you really don't have to concentrate a lot. The sponge will do the work itself. So I've noticed that when I do a lot of critiques with my students, I'm always telling them, you're not leaving enough speckles at the edge of your trees. Somehow there's a tendency of pruning them, right, using hedge clippers. And I personally have always encouraged them to leave areas like this, like little floaties, like little leaf clusters, to give a sense of looseness, and you do see those in nature. So as you can see, when you have the sponge technique, well, you can't avoid it. It's going to happen one way or another. And that the topping of it will give you some effects that you're going to be surprised, because here's the thing. We have what is called the left brain painting, right? So what we do is we carry habits of a symmetrical world into our painting. I better paint it and do it at the same time talk. And you carry that and you end up creating circles and ovals and symmetrical areas. The sponge technique won't allow you to do that. There's no way, because it's too unpredictable. But when you use something like a pen like that, you're going to tap into that left brain as you did with a child, and you're going to mirror those habits that you had when you were younger. I'm going to try using Payne's Gray and this yellow and see what I can end up with. Okay, again, I like to wet it. Just the secret is just to spot wet so you get some bleeding. You don't want a lot of hard edges. So just here and there, randomly spot wet. I'm starting to really like this over here. You can practically just leave it like that. But anyway, I like the contrast where you have a lot of soft areas and then you have the more definition in the trees. Okay, so I'm just, normally I would wait for that to sit in there and go get a cup of coffee or something in the meantime. But since you're watching, I'll speed it up with paper towel. But I don't advise you to do that because it's going to dry in different areas. It's going to be too randomly soft and too randomly hard somewhere else. Okay, so we want to make sure that we don't repeat that color. That's why I stopped there right away. I don't like to repeat. I don't like to mirror colors that are in the foreground in the middle ground. Okay, so it's not wet enough. I'm using rough paper, but it works well on cold press. But I have the impression it works a little bit better on rough paper. I did some playing around with it yesterday quite a bit. When in doubt, create bleeding effects in watercolor. See, we're still getting too much of a mirrored look there, so I'm going to have to change that. Rinse my sponge. These sage brushes are pretty gray. I also have a paper towel here that I can squeeze it to get some of the pigment out there. That's better right there. So you want some of those hard edges, but let other areas bleed. And just rely on the happy accidents. Just take into account that watercolor is very impressionist. Don't worry about being so exact. In fact, the more things that look out of focus and somewhat incoherent, the more likable the painting will be. Joe, when you go back and forth with your brush against the bristle, does it ruin the brush? Oh, you mean when I do the shoveling technique? No, not necessarily. Well, the best thing, that's a different technique, by the way, Barbara, that you're bringing up. That's an alternate way of doing the trees. In this case, I'm using sponges, right? But you've seen me use the shovel technique. Not really. First off, they're bristle brushes. You don't have to worry about it. Because I don't push hard on it. Yeah, they're called sage brushes or sage bushes. They have two. It's a funny name. I don't know why they call them brushes, but yeah, that's the formal name of them as well. There. So we can just leave that part. And we're insinuating that these are either rabbit bushes or sage brushes. Yeah, so there. And so we do have a vignette. Just to make it more vignette-ish, the best thing would just be to take, let's say, some violet. See, as my professional years go by, I become looser and looser, more impressionist, less concerned about realism. My students have witnessed that over the 10 years. And when I end up with things like this, again, my camera. Why does it do that? It's not behaving well. I'm going to have to stop the stream again. Okay. We're back. Okay, so we're just going to do some splattering here. I'm going to put a towel in front of my computer monitor because when you start to splatter, it goes everywhere. You might want to just, okay. Are we all back here now? See, this is what you do for a vignette. And it's just supposed to represent flowers. No, I wouldn't use sponges for rocks. I'll stop the splattering. Oh, when you do splattering, do it on one side more than the other. Don't balance it out. You know, just do a little, and I'm just going to echo some of it here. So you can see this is very, very much a watercolor. Okay, don't compete. Make sure one good recipe for success in a painting is that when you take an imaginary line, side A of your painting should be dramatically different than side B. Then you know you're on the right track. By the way, you can all hear me and see me, right? Okay, so I'm done. Well, okay, okay. You know what? Just to make this look more like a completed thing, I'm just going to do a little effect back here for you. And then maybe something here so we don't have a gap. And then we'll just leave the cabin pending because I got several things to do here. Well, I can go around because the house will be darker. I can go around here. That doesn't matter. Again, I'm not trying to complete a full painting because I have several options. I want to show you autumn trees. I want to show you frosted trees, even a sky. So we can't get it all in one session. So I'm just going to put this in the background, glaze right over, and put some purple back there. Use atmospheric perspective, use purple, and that solves the problem. Hey, that was squeaky clean. I'm using a porcelain palette, by the way. They're not very handy to take to a workshop because they're too heavy. It's like almost the weight of the porcelain cover of your toilet sink, your toilet tank. I use the best brushes are for me are Winsor Newton Scepter Gold, but they're hard to get now. Anyway, that's like something in the distance. Here, I'll just pop this in there. There. I could use a sponge for this too, but let's not overdo it so that we have a little bit of drawing as well. I'm going to go right into here and just let that. One thing for sure, in my book anyway, I always insist with my students about this. You always want to have a wet on wet effect somewhere in a watercolor, no matter what the subject is, whether it's a portrait or a still life. You always want something that's going to have bleeding edges to validate the beauty of the medium of watercolor. this is turning out better than what I thought. I like that. I like that foreground. So years ago, I would try to define all the sage brushes and all the little grass strands. But no, you get somewhat lazier over the years, but that's a good thing, because then that makes you become looser, which is every artist's dream come true, is to become loose. They all say, "Oh, I wish I was that loose." No, this doesn't have a download to it. It stays on YouTube perpetually. You don't have to download it. YouTube does not remove its videos. Unless, of course, the content is inappropriate, which I don't believe in my case that's going to be a problem. It's very appropriate. In fact, YouTube is looking for content like this. They promote, when you're doing things that are artistic or cultural, they actually give that a priority. And start to put publicity on it, because that's what they want ultimately, right? Okay, so there you go. We have almost a painting. Geez, I even feel like putting the house in, but we'll try to see if we have some time later on to do that. But yeah, this actually turned out quite good. Well, there you go. Let's see, if you can do your own trees like this. Now, you might be a beginner, and so you might not think, well, this is a little bit too complicated for me to do. But that doesn't mean you can't do that one tree and practice it. I still do those. I still practice like that. Like in my studio, like I did this little attempt also to do that. These are in my garbage can, by the way. Played around with the sponges, see what I can end up with. Sort of like be prepared for tomorrow, which is today. Here, let's do this, for example. See, again, the only way to really validate this technique is to put the branches on it, and then it suddenly comes to life big time. I don't think it matters what company. I think all of them make nice. I have a 12 by 16 inch, I think, palette. They're all nice. They're just, one thing about it is that the puddles are very, I've noticed that in the plastic mixing palettes for watercolor, you start to get areas that start to go like the beads break apart from the puddle, and it's hard to mix. I don't know if any of you have experienced that. But that will never happen with a porcelain palette. And they're so easy to clean as well. There, so you could do things like that. I'll just add a little bit more. There. And then so you can, again, I'm paying attention to where one side is different than the other. The only thing is that this is buyer beware. The problem with this is it's a nice technique, but the problem is that once you look at like an inch like that or 2 inches, it looks great. But as you keep adding and creating a clone stamping, it gets tiring after a while on the eye. So you need to get this soft edges in there and this kind of bleeding for it to work. You can see my point, right? How this gets tiring. I mean, it's great, but only 2 inches, not the whole thing. Okay. So let's do another thing. Let's do some autumn trees. Get this off. Tape it on. That's pretty fast, right? A painting done in 55 minutes. And again, I'm not going to do the whole thing. Let me do a little commercial break for you. This starting Saturday, if you don't mind. I mean, obviously, the idea of this demo was for that. Where if you sign up, if you go to artistnetwork.com, here, let me put this up for you. You might want to take a screenshot of this. Here's the information, right? I have a Facebook page that you can join. There it is. Take a screenshot of this. You just hit your print key and open it in Paint or whatever. And artistnetwork.com, that's the company that publishes the art magazine. So it's an honor for me to be working for a company that's so important in the art instruction world. Very good teaching credentials. Registration is open for our upcoming live stream workshop that starts this Saturday. And I showed you the picture already. I'll just show it one more time because some people joined late. That's going to be our watercolor. So you're going to learn how to do a vignette. You're going to learn how to insinuate. That background was very soft. I'm happy with this painting as well. I hope when I replicate that, I can pull it off as well. Hopefully. Anyway. So March, that's next. Artistnetwork.com. Easy to remember. Artistnetwork.com. And Scott Artist Network is actually posting the link there in your chat. Okay, so let's get back to what we came here for, right? Okay. I noticed that watercolor trees look better when they're done with the ochres. Like the autumn trees are always favorable because they're these yellow oranges that people prefer over the greens. So you're going to probably like these more, hopefully. Try my pen. Squeaky clean. Okay, so we're going to take out raw sienna, some of this primary yellow just to give it a glow. Now we're going to take out some orange and then some green, just have it all mixed together. And if I were to try to replicate those trees, it probably wouldn't look the same. It would look different. Because I'm not worried about drawing them in. I'm just concerned about the effect, the special effect. Okay, so let's see. Let's use my sponge again. I'm washing my sponge thoroughly. Squeeze out the excess water. And let's see what we can pull off here. Let's just put the sky in very quickly too. Cerulean. The reason I'm using ceruleans is it has a little bit of green in it. And that is preferable because it'll harmonize. See, the advantage of cerulean is it's got yellow and it's got blue, right? So it's got some yellow in it. So it harmonizes with your green trees and it harmonizes with your autumn trees. The worst thing that you can do is use an ultramarine blue in the landscape because it has no yellow in it and there's no way to harmonize that color. And cobalt blue is too close to the primary blue anyway, so I don't like that either. You can also use Prussian blue for your skies. Let's put a little bit of an orange glow there. Again, I always prefer to err on the side of light skies than dark skies. I'm using Artist rough paper right now, 140 pounds. And yeah, so there. And the class next Saturday is $14.99. And it will go on to about 5 o'clock in the evening, from 1 to 5. Sometimes it goes longer, but that's on me. Okay, so let's spot wet there too. This is something that a very important concept that I want to tell you. It's called a gradient plane, where I went from blue to orange. During these regular classes, you would see much more of that, but it's a very powerful mechanism to bring out the beauty of your paintings. I don't use 300 pound, and the reason, Barbara, is that I have a very good contraption called the Gorilla like the army, not gorilla like the animal, watercolor board that you use clamps, and you screw into the metal, and it compresses your painting. It pulls the paper like a drum, and you don't need the 300 pound. It's an excellent contraption. I can't live without it. Okay, so here we go. I'm just gonna spontaneously dry some of those areas, because we want some of those okay, here's my brush. We want some of those speckly things showing at the edge. I want to borrow one more color from here. This is another palette. That's the ordinary plastic palette. It's not bleeding enough. Now you can also do this. You can add some water to that, so it doesn't look so repetitive. So you can combine the tools. It doesn't have to be the sponges per se. So let's say that the contour would be good to do with the sponges. And somebody asked me earlier, what technique do I prefer? I think probably the answer would be combine it, right? You do the brushwork inside of it, but then the contour, you leave that technique. Because you don't want it to be too spotty either. I need to experiment more with it. Okay, so this would be inside. So we can put some green in here too. There. I think this is going to work just fine. I had done this painting before. If you want, I can show you the painting. A lot of this I do. When I do like tree swatches myself, I don't actually use a photograph. I just do them out of my head. As long as I'm concentrating on making sure that we have two different sides. See, this is already creating a very nice effect in there, isn't it? Yeah, okay. So there, I'll put the photograph up later. It's just a painting that I did. Not really a reference photo. Okay. So let's see over here. Now we got a lot of yellow, orange here. We don't want to have it compete on this side, so we're going to lean more towards this color. So I can use my brush for the middle part. So I'm really liking. You have to order it by Amazon, Barbara. That's how I got it. Okay, so more of this over here. So we'll use the brush in the middle part, and then we'll use a sponge for the contour. So I'm just dipping right into the paint directly, making sure I don't go too far. So let's do a little test run. If you need to mix the paint more, just squeeze it so you don't end up with these little chunky parts. So you can see me, look, I'm seeing the puddle on my palette. So it takes a little bit of trickery, but you'll get it. Let's get darker than that. I think what made my system crash is I was recording at a high definition. So now it's working just fine. Put some orange in here too. If you start to get that too much of a chunky kind of look to it, then you can dissolve that with your brush, add water to it. Probably a few of those speckles will look good. Looks like fun, doesn't it? Paint trees the easy way is very true in this case. Don't have to worry about drawing, just stamp them on. Okay, I'm going to give you guys another really neat secret. Stay tuned. Take this one to the bank and deposit it. So you just squeeze it. If I end up with too much of a chunky area, or if it's a little bit too discordant, just squeeze it into the puddle. For some reason, you're still going to get enough color variety anyway, more than on a brush, by the way, doing this technique. I've noticed that. Okay, the secret is, do this. Make a square with your fingers and peek through that little square, and everywhere you move it, there should be a shift of color and or value, but definitely color. Get my thumb out of the way. See? So when I'm placing these colors in, I make sure that's happening. But don't be too abrupt at it, because this is called color variegation. So you don't want it to abrupt too quickly. That's why I added water to this. Or neither do you want to have like flat areas that are not shifting color. But that's the secret right there. So you can see, and then also, like I said earlier, that side of the painting should be different than this side of the painting. As you can see, it's very, very different. Okay, let's put some branches on that. These are birch trees. We can also, wait, you know what I can do? I can put the negative painting in there now that I'm at it, before I do that. So I'm just going to take the same colors, but just more concentrated. So let's say we're going to go Same as the viewfinder. I don't know. Maybe that size. I think the viewfinder window is a little bit bigger than the square that you'd make with your fingers. It's got to be like 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, something like that. I got some backgrounds here. Well, when that happens, just flood it with more paint. See, I'm rushing a lot here too right now to try to get all this information in. So anyway, to get rid of backgrounds, just flood it with more pigment. But let me dry it. Let me do it the right way. Put a little bit more glow in this tree. Sometimes backgrounds can actually turn out to be nice, like that one over there, because it gives me like a hard edge. Okay, this should go about this far. Let's mirror some of that over here. And I have a way to capitalize on these backgrounds as well. Okay, this is a little bit too monotonous. I think if you use, for oils, if you use water-soluble oils, I think this should work very well. Because then if you use mineral spirits on your sponge, you're gonna be breathing the fumes. So I think that would be the good moment to buy the water-soluble oils. You really can't go wrong, as you can see. The secret is just leave a few gaps there so that I can put the tree branches through, which I'm going to do right now. And then I'll put the darks in later. So let's make these. A lot of explosion of color, right? So I'm going to use Payne's Gray, raw sienna. Well, that's very kind of you, Shuba. Das. Water-soluble oils, the ones that I like the most are Lucas. birch trees. I just pour some. I almost never use ultramarine because it's very hard to harmonize. Like I said earlier, how do you harmonize that color? So that's why the blue greens are better. Okay, I'm going to move this over a little bit. There. It is permanent green pale, correct? Okay, so here we go. Birch trees in the shade. No, PA 76 is not available yet for signing up. We're trying to get the people in for the this Saturday watercolor vignette. Remember that no matter what medium you paint in, that's not a reason not to sign up, because what I teach, the principles that I teach in any medium apply to any medium. So let's say if it's a water, for example, what I just mentioned today about having two different sides. Right? Don't concentrate your tree trunks at the bottom but not at the top. Well, that applies to all mediums. It doesn't have to be just exclusive to watercolor. Again, I have it set up where there's evergreen trees back here. There's a blue mountain. But we're focusing just on the trees for now. We don't want this to go too late. It's already, 2:18. We're still good with time, but I have to get... You know what? You can even use this technique for waves. For seascape waves. Here's an important tip. Make sure you don't end up with a V at the bottom of your trees. Okay, now we're going to negative paint. That's what's going to bring out the form. You can do that with a brush or you can do that with your sponge. So let's do a bit of each. So I'm going to add some violet to my mixture now. Violet is perfect. Just add that to all of your ochres and oranges, and then you'll get the exact, it's the complement to the oranges and the yellow oranges, and you can get the exact hue that you want. Watch this technique. This is a round brush here. This is rough paper. This is another way of doing this. See the roundness there? You use the belly of the convex belly of your brush, hold it flat, and then you drag it like this, and you're going to get all the foliage automatically. Don't try to draw it in. I almost never use a brush like a pen. It's always this way. And it's also important to not go 50-50 with your darks and your lights. Let's change the color a little bit. Yeah, just go to, thank you, Brenda, that's very kind of you. Just go to artistnetwork.com, and then you'll see there's a thumbnail that says Paint Along. That takes you to the page where the information of the course is all about. We'd be glad to have you on board, Barbara. I mean, you're so active in the chat here, asking so many questions. I mean, you're an instructor's dream come true. I would love to have you in the group. With that kind of enthusiasm, you motivate me as well. Because artists, we do paint for other people, right? That's the whole idea. Especially when you're teaching, the motivation is the students wanting to learn. I have a lot to offer in that sense, and I'm going to tell you why. I went to a lot of workshops and looked for instructors, and I saw a lot of poor instruction to the point where I just gave up, because they seemed to do things with a lot of talent. They did things naturally, but they couldn't verbalize it. So what I did is I subscribed to the art magazines, Southwest Art, one of them 30 years ago, and which is the company, this is the ironic thing, that's the company that I'm actually working with. Southwest Art, the ones that publish Southwest Art magazine. I always joke with my wife and I say, who would ever think that 30 years ago when I signed up to get these magazines, that I would end up giving their online classes? Like, where does that happen? But I'll tell you where I came to the conclusion, where I reversed engineered a lot of all my heroes, all my favorite artists' work. And I wanted to understand what makes them click. Like, why is their artwork so good? Why do I like it so much? And I knew that it was in the symbols, like creating artistic symbols, especially watercolor. And I ended up noticing that they're all doing about the same thing. Like, they all went into the Situation Room in the White House, and they made an agreement to depict things in the same way, somewhat in the same way. So I ended up with a list of 200 pointers, 200 landscape pointers. That if your paintings are only as good enough as how many of those pointers you actually know. And I start revealing those in my online classes. For example, just for ordinary trees, there's 23 of them. I gave a few already away. For example, here you want to make sure you have something I call a graceful line, which is a roller coaster effect. So trees, to be effective, they're more in the line than in the realism. So I'm going to make some birch trees here now. So we've got ourselves some foliage there, right? Pretty convincing. And again, if I were to repeat this painting, it would end up looking totally different. So the important, now here's another secret. Any line that's longer than 2 inches is going to be cumbersome for the viewer. The eye moves too quickly. So the whole beauty, and the least referenced technique, which is lines, is the most important one. That's what I find ironic. The number one formula for success is to move your viewer's eye lazily in the painting, slowly, take the viewer for a pace, don't rush the viewer. So that would imply that anything that's, let's say, 2 inches long and it's straight, it's gonna go too fast. So, for example, here, the technique would be to slow it down by putting little protrusions. Like I can put, like this is a birch tree, right? So I can do things like this. Here, let me just put more of this. I'm working really fast here because we want to put a sky in. It's not damp now. This part's not damp. This part's completely dry paper. But yes, when I do this, I do a lost and found. With some areas I wet, some areas I don't. And that's where you get the bleeding part, where you get all these effects. Anyway, if you look at the photograph, you can see that you got some background trees there. Just calibrating the camera a little bit. There. So how's that? Make it a little bit darker right under here. This is an umbrella effect. So there you go. That gives you an idea how you can do these trees. My class would be on Twitch, the regular Saturday class, because because we conceal that video for those who sign up. It's not, see, YouTube is public, right? So we're charging a fee of $14.99 for next Saturday. And it's only fair that if you're going to pay a fee, that people should be being able to see it for free. That's why we don't use YouTube for that. Do a little bit more negative painting here, just to give it more of a 3D aspect to it. Okay, again, I'm not going to finish the whole thing because you can see the photograph. All right, let's do another one. Let's do a sky. A cloudy sky. Sound like a good idea? This is so easy to do. Unbelievably easy. So again, we're going to spot wet. You know what? I'm just going to grab my hand and go. Let's do it this way. I'm dipping my hand in the water and just splattering. Kids would love that, huh? In the meantime, prepare my mixture. You can see, if I tilt this up, you can see the lost and found edges. Okay, so we're going to use, let's say, Prussian blue, some cerulean blue. And we're going to top with the sponge as well. Let's use this big one. Are we ready? I'm going to put a little bit of yellow over here. Hold your breath, folks. Okay, just put a little bit of It so happens that we want to have a little bit of light color in the sky, right? So the principle of clouds, see, this is what I mean about the pointers. When I do a sky, for example, I teach all my students what pointers they need to do skies successfully. Skies are warmer. The fluffy part, the white part of the clouds are warmer at the horizon. And I did it the reverse here. And cooler at the zenith. This is the zenith, that's the horizon. That's the principle. So you add more yellow at the bottom. This doesn't have a photo. This is right out of my head. So I'm adding more yellow here to comply with that. So now I'm going to get my brush, my sponge, and dip it into the mixture that I just put there. Here we go. Watch how easy this is. If you get too intense, just squeeze it, make a puddle out of it. There's no way I can follow a photograph anyway with the sponges. It's too spontaneous. There, you can already see the cloudy sky coming up. If you need to fine tune, just take your brush and go in there. Now note that I started from the very top left corner. Why would that be? Let me see if my students, my regular students, can answer that one. What am I thinking in this very moment? I'm sure you're going to give me the answer. See what I'm trying to do here? There's more to it. There's more to it. There's your sky, guys. Yeah, that's correct. Each corner has to be different. Thank you for reminding me, Mary. So here I'm going to put my blue here. Correct. But there's more. There's more. Why did I start here? And why am I moving this way? It's called a blank composition, starting with a C. You know what, Cindy? We can add that to the glossary. Converging line composition. So I'm creating a visual path that's very subtle. So let's say I'm going to have a lighthouse over here, right? So you also use the sky, and think of this as the Panama Canal, where the boats are going through. You open or the Suez Canal. You don't have to make it so exact. I mean, the viewer can jump this little spot there, but in other words, you're purposely leading the viewer using lines of the clouds to a certain area, which would be over here. Isn't that cool? There's my cloudy sky. And the advantage of wetting it is that you're having little variances here. Like little clouds that are forming. Leave those little speckly things in there. Leave all those. But you can see the most beautiful line that you can produce is a lost and found edge. So this one, for example, here is very 5-star because you have some of it that's hard edge that your eye can focus on, because you don't want everything soft because the eye needs to focus somewhere. But you don't want it too focused because it becomes tiring. So this is working really nicely over here, and then it gets very soft over here, gets a little bit more hard edge, gets soft over here. This is exactly what you're looking for in a sky. And now I can just put some of the rain clouds in there just to give it more, like a better look. So let's just make this, for example, over here, this is going to be like a stormy kind of sky in here. I could just throw my brush like that. Purple and yellow don't turn green. And even if you do get a little bit of green in your clouds, that's fine if your painting has greens in it, because it's called color harmony. There goes the definition that Cindy's going to put up. Color harmony. What is color harmony? See, look, just now on this video, you can copy these strokes, because again, it's all in the sleight of the hand to get this to work. But the twirling the brush like that is the way to do it. So we have a convincing sky now. And it's a little bit more yellow down here. It's exactly what I want. So if we put evergreen trees up against that or whatever, it's very convincing. Let me just get rid of this a little bit too strong in here. And then this, we can get rid of that. Okay. As you can see, you can still use this technique to get the sponge to do that. It's very hard to draw that in, but if you use the sponge, that stippling effect, you're going to end up with this. So now just imagine this as a seascape with a crashing wave. So for instance, here, it's the same principle. Stay tuned. Just the only thing is you're going to have to think in reverse format, right? There's a seascape or close up the wave. So you just think in the opposite. You put the dark sky into this crashing foam, and you get the same result as the trees. So that's why if I do the sky, just reverse it, and you got the seascape. So right over here, that looks like a crashing wave, right? Okay. Next one, frosted trees. This painting was done no, that's not it. Well, okay, I deleted it from here, but let me see. Yeah, okay, well, let's do some frosted trees now. That tree where it says in the logo here, in the banner, paint trees the easy way, that was done, those frosted trees were done with the sponge. There's no other way to do it. You're forced to. So how do you do frosted trees in watercolor, right? Okay. Yeah, painting should be easy. It shouldn't be difficult. Oh, I had the drawing of this already. Here we go. It's supposed to be fun. Look, if you have the right information, and I'm more than willing to give it to you, this should be fun. It shouldn't take 20, 30 years to get good at it. It just should be a matter of knowing those principles. Okay, so let me give you an example of that. I'm going to bring up a PDF for you to see. Okay. So let's just say for evergreen trees. This is what you will learn when you sign up for our online classes. Okay, hold on. Display capture. Okay. This is just an example, right? Let's look at these trees. Okay, just what we're learning today. Pointers for painting trees with foliage. I'm giving you all the keys here. I tell you what the problem is. The trees are mostly monochromatic, too many sky holes. In most cases, they're symmetrical. The grass and foliage are the same color, and in some cases the same value, which compromises the painting. And then what I do is that all the reverse engineering that I did with the top 30 professional artists, I put it all together in a blender and I poured out a smoothie, and this is what the result is. And I'm more than willing to share all this with you as you take the classes. So for example, just a bonus right now for today. Ensure you do not have two similar sides. We spoke about that, right? About an imaginary line down the middle, compare both sides. Whatever you do on one side, don't do it on another. Make sure the foliage body always ends up being ovalish. There you go. That's going to solve a lot of problems. So for example, in this photograph here, it tells you where to detect the problems. See that tree that's at the end of the icy stream? Well, it's, first of all, it's completely symmetrical. So if you look at it and you compare both sides, you have a problem there, right? So knowing that, you solve it. See, maybe a lot of you have heard and read things that's called abstract shapes or asymmetrical shapes, but nobody ever defines it. And the definition is to have two different sides. Design pleasing, graceful lines for their contours, varied colors, but respect the predominant one, and so on and so forth, right? So we end up with 23 key pointers on how to do trees. And with those 23, you should be able to handle trees pretty easily. That's how it works. So the whole thing put together is 200 pointers. So let me put this photograph up for you, since a lot of you want to see the photograph. Joe, there are many muddy lakes in the southern U.S. Would you suggest editing in more trees to distract from the muddy brown lakes? You know, here's the thing, Hudson. I have so much to say. I mean, I wish I could be with you guys for 10 hours. But the big mistake that most artists are making is they're thinking that they have to agree with nature when they're painting. And you don't. You have to recreate new symbols and take liberties. Obviously, muddy lakes are not interesting. So you take the liberty of saying, okay, there's a lake, but you change it to something that's more appealing. And unfortunately, that's happening so much that people are just too concerned about representing the scene in its accuracy. And all the top artists don't do that. Okay, let me just bring this photograph up for you guys. I mean, there's nothing realistic what I'm doing today. They're all symbols. So the whole solution to the painting is in the symbols. Okay, this is what I would try to accurately, no, sorry, I should say not accurately represent. That just gives me an idea, but I have to redesign things, right? So look at my drawing and look at the photo. If you look at this here, if I take an imaginary line down the middle and compare both sides, well, it's a little bit symmetrical because these two sides are about the same, but it's different. And look at the contour here. This is what I refer to as a graceful line, which is a roller coaster effect. That's where the whole answer is. The answer is in designing these lines and these shapes. Okay, let's go for it. So I'm going to clean the palette. Okay, so now I'm going to have to do reverse thinking because for me, for this frosted tree to work, I have to paint backwards, right? I have to put the sky into the tree, not the other way around. Just like I showed you with the seascape. So Hudson, I would have to actually see the photograph and then give you advice, which I do during my live classes. The really cool thing about them is that people send me like, Joe, I'm having problems doing a waterfall, for example. Can you do a demonstration? And when time permitted, I do that right there when they ask for it. And I believe that all questions should be answered. Okay, so we're going to do, there's a little hint of purple. We're going to get some Indian red, some Hooker's green, cerulean blue, so we're going to do a little bit of Payne's gray as well. Let's go for it. Should wet that. Yeah, basically it's consistent with my watercolor palette, correct, Barbara? I mean, I don't use always the same colors, but yeah, there's a consistency in it's better that way anyway, because you become acquainted with the same colors and you start to so-called master the color combinations if you're very familiar with your palette. That doesn't mean I haven't changed things as the years go by. See, when it comes to watercolor, I'm thinking several chess moves ahead on my chessboard. So I have to think 5 moves ahead of time. Because I can't, you know, it's not like oils that you can just think in that very present moment. You can't do that with watercolor. Right now, my whole system is performing perfectly well. Let's make it a little bit darker. So we can bring out the glow of those frosted trees, right? One thing I do like about these free demos where I don't have like those 5 hours available is I become very loose because I'm rushing, and that rushing actually produces very spontaneous effects that I normally don't get when I got like a 5-hour class going on. Which is what watercolor is supposed to be about anyway. You're supposed to just capitalize on the happy accidents. Yes, the Vignette, no, once the class is over, the Vignette class is over, it's not available to purchase, but you can download the recordings. That you can do. You keep them on an external hard drive perpetually. It doesn't sit on YouTube. It doesn't. We don't use YouTube anyway. So I'm creating a rhythm. There you go, Cindy. Post that one, dear. A rhythm. In other words, we're creating a movement like that. Now, the viewer doesn't know that. You know that. Okay, now let's get into the sponge. See, these are our secrets. We're like doctors looking at doctors looking at X-rays or MRIs. We use these sophisticated techniques, which is melodic lines and graceful lines and rhythm and all those kind of the terminology. The viewer just sees the end result and says, "I like that painting." They don't really know why. They just like it. We know why because of the techniques that are involved. So when I establish a rhythm, I'm moving the viewer's eye in a rhythmic way. Does that make sense? So it's pleasing to the viewer when you do that. And it's being defined right now. So we're going to have the sunlight strike this area over here. Here, do you want me to... I think I can finish this painting pretty quickly. Let's go for it. How's that sound? Want me to do that? We're into just barely 2 hours. I think we can go all the way to 3:30 and I'll finish it by then. Because this one really inspires me. So let's get her done. Personally, I'm in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. But online, I'm everywhere. And can be everywhere this coming Saturday. Sorry, but I just had to throw that one in, guys. This has got like a 15% angle because of the camera. Okay, let's go for it. Let's get this one done. I think we can do it really fast. Now, what did we learn last course? The power of violets, right? So let's throw some of that in. For example, here, let me. There, we throw that in there. I'm going to use the sponge for the negative painting of this. See, right now the watercolor doesn't materialize because we need to see what's going to happen 5 steps from now. Joe, if your reference photo is all woods, would you trim the trees at the top and show more sky? I would need to see the photo, Kathy. I can show you some paintings that I've done with woods, if you want. So again, that's where these, normal classes are good for, because I can take my time and show you examples how to answer all those questions. Cropping, I can tell you in general, cropping is an excellent way to ground, so to say, your trees into context. It's not a good idea to show the tops of the trees if it's the woods, because you want the viewer to walk into the painting. I got quite a few paintings, by the way. If you send, well, yeah, I was going to say if you send me an email, but I can show you. Well, I'll give you my email. If somebody wants to type it there for me, Cindy, I can send you. You guys can ask me some questions. If you have some questions and you want some advice, feel free to email me. I don't charge for that. I just want to establish a relationship with you so you can feel motivated to take the classes. But if you send me your photograph, I can crop it for you, and then I can send you some examples how I would solve certain problems. And again, students email me all the time. They don't have to wait for the class to start. I take care of them on email, and I never charge them for it because, again, it's just a matter of getting a student-teacher relationship going. I'm not very selfish with my time. Or I should say I'm not selfish at all with my time. I remember I had to struggle a lot as an artist. I wasn't getting the answers. So I understand that a lot of people are looking for answers. They sign up in expensive workshops. Only to come back with maybe 2 or 3 answers. Okay, you can see I'm putting a little sunspot over there. So if my email is johannes@improvemypaintings.com. If somebody wants to type it for me, I would appreciate it, so I can continue painting. Now, many of my students are here with me today. They can give you some information about what goes on. We're going to finish this one. There, that little sun area, we're going to exploit that. There it is. Pearl put my email address in there. So feel free to email me. Maybe you need extra information about what the course is about and all that too, right? Okay. Okay, now comes the sponge. We're going to negative paint. Which sponge do I use this time? I got several. I think I'm going to try to use the bigger one. See, this one's got, sometimes you get lucky and a sponge can have more like a smaller little indentations and then big ones like this. It's a matter of just playing, and then you can roll it sometimes and get different variations. Okay, so we're going to use, first let's mix it, Payne's Gray, violet. You don't even see these violets in nature, but in paintings, oh my gosh, they look so beautiful. So we really take advantage. Here, let me give you an example of that. I just finished a course last Saturday, and I ended up with this watercolor. Not last Saturday, but the one before that. And you're going to see, there it is. I did that live in my class on Saturday. And you can see the purples in there and the oranges in the snow. You don't see those in real life. But we exploit that. So you're sort of like creating an artificial scene. So we got all these. Just intermingle them a little bit. What you're doing is basically burning the chroma or the saturation. So here goes. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's do a little bit of stamping to make sure we didn't undermix, which we did. There go the frosted trees. You hear that water? That's because I have a bird bath in here. And those are birds. There goes our frosted tree. Looks good. Now let's here's another technique. Avoid the wall effect where you have just, like if you look at the photograph, there's just a wall of trees. I like to put more layers of foliage. So I put bushes in front of trees, like I'm doing right now. And that creates more depth. Ooh, that's starting to look really good. I'm getting excited here. Adrenaline is rushing. That turned out really cool. And don't touch it then. Things I got just the right amount of water in it too. Wait till I put the branches in there. It's going to make much more sense. Oops. When that happens, just push down on the sponge and just make the puddle more fluid. There we go. Pearl is a pearl, isn't she? Wow. I think this is one of the best frosted trees I've done so far. You get lucky sometimes. So again, we're going to wet it to get lost and found. Thank you, Master King. I'm reading your text. I appreciate it. Okay, let's use a more fine. Okay, we're going to have a little of this, a little bit of this. Do a test run first. It's a little bit too wet. So let's work on this side. We got to 230. If you get too much paint on it, just squeeze your sponge, just like you do with a brush. It's like adding, there it is. So you soften it up and you get less power in there. You don't want it so dark. It's like it overwhelms, right? There we go. If you go to my website, improvemypaintings.com, improvemypaintings.com, you can see some of my artwork there to begin with. And then you can also see my palette, the colors that I use. Okay, something tells me I had suspected that I'm going to have to darken the sky a tad to bring that out. It dried a little bit too light. But look how you can create the frosted tree effect. The way to get the regular classes is somebody, can you do that for me, Pearl? Can you put the Artist Network webpage there? And you see where it says paint along, that's where you find me and you find the courses. Okay, it's still too wet there. My students are helping me out so much. Thank you so much. They're very nice. There's the website right there. And as you can see, I varied the colors a tad, right? So you don't have competition. I want this painting to glow. I'm ambitious for this one. Because I know a strong photograph makes a strong painting. And I have a strong photograph, which means I should have a strong painting. Let's see if that's true. That's another thing in my classes. Bottom line, the answer is in the lines. It's okay, Carol. There's not a lot of questions, and I'm reading them. I appreciate it, but it would take me more time calling you and everything. If I miss a question, somebody can just copy and post it, but I'm really closely paying attention to the text. There we go. Got that. That's exactly what I wanted. Oh, yeah. So the answer is learn the shapes. Lines are #1 priority. Composition is very important too. But here's where the whole problem is. It's making the transition from the reference material to the painting. That's where all the things go wrong. Because obviously you just can't copy a reference photo. Because mine's different than what you're seeing, right? Right now I'm focusing only on the online, Barbara. You can reach more people that way. And besides, it's so much more cost effective. Like $19.99 for the normal courses that don't start this Saturday, but start the following Saturday, is the paint along, which is 3 Saturday course. That's $19.99 for 3 Saturdays. It's over 18 hours of instruction. Okay, so I'm gonna bring out the light of this tree. So we're going to make it look like there's a storm coming up in there. Stormy skies. And that way I can also bring out the light from the frosted tree as well. This coming Saturday, some people I can see are joining late. Okay, the people will type the answer in the text there. Thank you for your interest, everybody. There we go. There. This coming Saturday, I have what is called a paint along. It's about a 5-hour class. It usually goes to 6 hours, to be honest. Now, creating what is called a visual path. which is what we refer to as a lead-in. It's called paint along because some students paint along with me. Others do it off the recording. Starting this Saturday. Now this, I'm have to create what's called a melodic line here, correct guys? That's going to have to be a very interesting line. No wobbly. That is such a key. When I learned that, when that hit me, I said, that's it. That's going to revolutionize my art. Because I always thought that the idea was to try to find something that was to interpret things to make them look as real as possible. That's where I made my mistakes. There, so that's called, look at the visual path. Okay, let me see. Let's use some more spongy. Okay, I want to do something first. I need to put the branches in there because I need to be motivated with those trees. So I like to get my branches in early because I want trees to look like trees. And this is, if this is looking good now, once we put the branches in, it should look way better than that. So let's start. And I think we can use what we have there. Now here's the technique. I go into the dark areas and there's a highlight here, so I stop and then I resume the branch over here like this and then I just let it fade in. See, that when I do that, that seems like this foliage cluster is coming forward. Okay, Pat, you go to artistnetwork.com and there's a thumbnail, there's a banner on the front page that says Paint Along. That's where you find out about it. Okay, remember, limit your branches at the top. There, they just posted the link. Okay, time to switch brushes. I'm really motivated with this painting. I'm not stopping it until I finish it. The trick is have different sizes of the branches by shifting your brushes. Now I'm using a rigger brush. Stay away from branches near the edge of the painting. That's called the periphery, something that we can get into later on. Huge concept, by the way. And sometimes my students help me. When I'm not sure about a decision, I ask them what they think if I should do it. They sometimes see things that I don't see, and they point it out, and I fix it. So my chances of getting a better painter are higher because I have backseat drivers in a good way, which means I won't crash. Okay, so I know as a fact, this is one good tip. You can get away with a lot of branches near the center of the painting, but once you go near the edge, lay off. Don't put them in there. It doesn't need any more. And the amount of branches that I put in there is just enough to tell me that it's a tree. I don't think it needs any more. So you put way fewer branches than what you normally see in real life. So here we go with this one. Remember, I only can get away with maybe a couple of inches at the most, and then slow it down by having some foliage overlap your branch. See, this is my danger zone, is the top. I think I should stop right there as well. Okay, I'm going to tap in some, I can see some, like some brown colors in there. I got lucky on this little effect. That was just because of the sponge. See that? It looks like there's a separation of foliage there. It's not attached to the tree. That's the spontaneity of your sponges. You get those effects. I like to milk those. Okay. There's always a lot of first-timers on YouTube, Carol. Still think that sky has to be darker. Make it more stormy. There goes our rubber stamping again. I usually have around 600 to 700 students, by the way. And I've taught over 20,000 students overall. Some of them for the last 10 years, and they're still here. See, look at that effect. I'm getting excited. A little bit of red doesn't hurt. Stay away from the bottom of the painting. The foreground should actually be pretty much left alone. Okay, let's introduce another little secret weapon here, a pastry brush. Soften the bottom of your bushes. Okay, so one of the things of composition that's very important is leave your immediate foreground alone. Subdue big time. I mean, I can put a few of these in here, but it should be very subdued. And then pack your middle ground with all the visual information. That's the answer. See, I'm just using a lot of gimmicks today. This is great for doing grass. Look. In fact, I found with the sponges, you can do some fantastic grass. But look. Just mix it up a little bit. See, I always like to add water to my areas of watercolor. By the way, you can do beautiful bougainvilleas also with sponge flowers. Oh, I need you guys for another 2 hours. Look how you can do grass with the pastry brush. So just imagine a old abandoned boat in there, like an old canoe or something, and you stack the grass right up against it. That's pretty cool, right? I also found you can do that with the sponge as well. So we found another application for the sponge. I'm just caressing it now, without pressing down. I'm not stamping, I'm just caressing it. There. A little bit like a vignette. But just imagine maybe a fence post or something and the grass is stacked up against it. It is cool. I don't think I need to do more. Maybe just pick up a little bit of the darks. I like to do this. There's another principle that I teach a lot, which is render 3D forms, which is exactly what I'm going to do now. See, look at the brushstroke. Okay. That's what you want to take these classes for. The Z, the C. Look, I need to create an irregular line. So I push down harder and then lighten my touch, disappear, and then harder again, and I get that irregular line. See? There, perfect. Otherwise, you just end up with a line. Do it on this side too. Here. A little bit darker. So I call that a Morse code line. Line, you know, SOS, line, dot, line, dot, exactly what I'm doing. Line, skip, line, dot. And so you move the viewer's eye slowly by interrupting that line. That's a little bit too parallel. There. I think we're done. I know. I'm going to finish this painting. It's going to take a little bit longer, but it's going too well. We're almost there anyway. Yes, you can use turpentine, Jay. And I would like you to submit it to the Facebook page when you do it, so I can see it, what you're doing. I haven't done a lot of experimentation with it, so I'll let you be the guinea pig. I've done some of it, but let's see what you can come up with. Okay. Before we do any stamping, let's check to make sure we got the right mixture. See, I knew it. Too strong. It's unpredictable, so you got to play it safe. There. And I have a tissue paper here ready just to blot it if I need to subdue that value contrast. Okay, this has no light hitting it, so we're just going to do it like this. A little bit more negative painting here to bring out some darks. That's practically working, right? Maybe I shouldn't fuss with it anymore. I want to darken the sky, but that's a risk. I know, I can just define this a bit. I can see all you guys, like when I the Gorilla watercolor board, when I mentioned that, suddenly a lot of people started buying it. I remember when I introduced pan pastel some years ago, and people Googled to find the cheapest price. It was at Fine Art Store in Rochester, New York. And the guy, he told me, because I visited the store later, and the guy said that he came in the next Monday morning and he couldn't believe it. He had like 100 orders. He says, "What? This must be a hack." He actually called his computer guy to make sure it wasn't a hack. How can you have 100 orders like that in a row from just one weekend to another? No, I mean right after the weekend, not even one weekend to another. And that's when the pan pastels were gaining momentum. We're there on this painting. I'm just going to put a little bit of negative painting in here. We're done. You know what I can do? For the ice to look a little bit more realistic, here's the principle of ice. Okay, first of all, let's darken that a tad. We're almost there. I'm going to show you, I'm going to give you the principle of painting ice. Because it's so smooth, you treat it like a gymnasium floor, where you're going to see some reflections in it, but very weak reflections. Another thing about ice is that it somehow freezes yellow ochre into it. So if I add yellow ochre to it, I create what is called a gradient plane. That's a new concept. Maybe for some of you. Gradient planes is what separates the big league from the little league. So if I put the warm yellow ochre in the foreground and then cool as I go into the distance, it creates more sense of depth, as you can see. Okay, now ice will still have some degree of reflection. Maybe that's a little bit too much. It's got a weak reflection. We can get some blue in there. Oh, that's looking right. And blend this way a tad. We're almost there. I didn't want to add the yellow. I mean, I could glaze some orange over there. We can try that. Put for about like a warm glow in the snow. I purposely withheld a little bit. There, that gives us the illusion of ice. So it's half the reflection that you normally see in a wet surface. Okay, well let's do a little glaze right over all this. Get some orange in there and give it a glow. And then we're done. I'm not going to go to that yellow orange. I'm just going to go, or maybe you know what? Even pink would be better. Oh no, because I would have to harmonize that with the rest of the painting. So we're just going to stay with the orange. Orange and yellow. Let's do a little test run first. How about that? Does that glow enough? Here we go. See how my students help me? There you had an example right there. I don't know if I would have dared to do that without them telling me, but since somebody brought it up, I said, well, let's go for it. And that's exactly what I did. And we do have the glow. Here, let me just get some water. I'll be right back. I have to clean. My water is very dirty because of the sponges. Give me just 1 minute. It's a live class that's going to happen. There we go. Maybe a little bit more. You are my student. Welcome, Lucien. You know what? Buy yourself a notebook. because you're going to jot down so many techniques, your head's going to spin. I sound very confident, but it's the truth. It actually is the truth. My students can vouch for that. I'm promoting myself, right? I'm sorry if I sound a little bit going overboard, but we're trying to this whole thing about this demo is to recruit students, right? So let's harmonize the painting now. Since I put those pinks in there, I got to put it elsewhere. Put it right on the snow as well. I know, but I tried to cover a lot today, right? But I did cover everything that we advertised. You know, somebody's saying that the classes are like the Springsteen concerts. They always last longer than what they're advertised. I think I've only finished a class on time only once. Every time, other time it's gone more than what it's advertised at. Calibrating the monitor a little bit better here. Still needs more. Okay, I think we have something there. Yeah. I think we're done. Oh, I know. We need to 3D these forms here. Hold on. I'll use a sponge for that. To 3D. I call it. I know it's a silly verb, but I use it. It means to make it hollow under here so it looks like it's round. And I think we're done. I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Okay. Well, you guys saw how to use sponges to create trees effectively, especially frosted trees. Like I said, that's the only way you're going to be able to do that. There's no way you can do that without using a sponge. I always tried to figure out how to do frosted trees with watercolor, and that was the way I figured it out. So I think we're done for today. But we have to say goodbye. But in a couple of days, if you sign up, we don't say goodbye, we say hello. And here's the information. Thank you for spending some of the afternoon with me. So I'll see you soon. Have a nice evening. Hey, take out your sponge and